Hello and welcome to Professor Weird's Weird Record Club, the program which we explore the records that get ignored by other channels. The weird, the wonderful, the psychedelic, the comic, the novelty, the downright odd. Well, in today's program, we are going to look at Demis Roussos' Psychedelic album. Yes, indeed. So, of course, if you're of a certain age, you will know Demis Roussos as a kind of middle-of-the-road singer who had a number of hits in the 70s, and he was a bit of a figure of fun because, you know, he was a big bloke, he was hairy, he wore a kaftan, and he was foreign. Hilarious. So I'm wearing my kaftan in honor of Demis Roussos today. Why do I have a kaftan? Well, because I used to play theremin in a psychedelic band in Hebden Bridge, but that's another story. Today we're going to look at Demis Roussos, the Greek side of my mind. So, of course, Demis was known for his hits in the 70s, things like Forever and Ever, and it was very middle of the road, the housewife's favourite. He became an unlikely sex symbol. But the cognoscenti, maybe we should say the prognoscenti, they knew that, in fact, Demis also had another life as the bass player, guitarist and singer with the Greek psychedelic prog band Aphrodite's Child, who you can see a compilation up here, and over there you can see their classic concept album 666. We'll do a program about Aphrodite's Child because they're a fantastic band, a really interesting band. Now, Aphrodite's Child had this obsession with the apocalypse. Their first album was called The End of the World. Their final album, you could see 666, The Book of Revelations, was another apocalyptic vision. And of course, Demis was in Aphrodite's Child with one Mr. Vangelis. Anyway, between Aphrodite's Child's second album and their final album, 666, Demis released his first solo album, and that continues in that sort of psychedelic, proggy, apocalyptic mood of Aphrodite's Child. So here it is, on the Greek side of my mind, with Demis's face there sort of in, I don't know, what looks like a dandelion. And what's interesting about this is it's a very Greek sound, although it's sung in English, sort of English. It's a very Greek sounding proggy psych affair. That's the back cover. We'll get into the tracks in more detail in a minute. Now, if you're in the UK, you probably see this version of the album. Exactly the same, except they've switched the order of a few tracks. And this is the one that I came across. It must have been, I don't know, 23 years ago, something like that. I picked it up in Honest Mix Emporium in Hebden Bridge for 10 pence. That was the best 10 pence I've ever spent. Anyway, let's get into Demis's psychedelic album. So it's an album I fell in love with as soon as I heard it, because I love Greek music, I love psychedelic music, and I too am obsessed with the apocalypse and the coming end and so on. So if we start with this, with the continental version of the album, very strangely it kicks off with a track called On the Greek Side of My Mind. Now this is quite a long spoken word poem. You've got sort of these floating Byzantine choir voices and so on, and you've got Demis intoning these strange visions that he's had, and it seems to sort of introduce the songs. Now, it's a bold choice for an opening track, and it goes on perhaps for a bit too long. The whole thing's repeated twice with different levels of histrionics. It reminds me a little bit, perhaps I shouldn't say this, it reminds me a little bit of William Shatner's interpretation of things like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, where he just gets a bit overwrought, you know. Newspaper taxis appear on the shore. So we get a bit of that as he sort of recites the poem over and over again. And then it moves on to a really beautiful song called The Star of the North, or She Came Up From the North, which is a really well-known Greek folk song about emigrating to America. I think it's from a film, actually. Now, The Demis's version is fantastic, really atmospheric. I think the thing that lets it down, and they've given it a kind of apocalyptic twist. It's about a goddess who knocks on his door, and then the well runs dry and the river runs dry, and then she dies. A lot of the lyrics are a bit indecipherable, and I think they could have done a better job, because it's such a beautiful song. I think they could have done a better job of translating it, or they should have run the lyrics past someone who could speak English, because that lets it down a bit. So it's a strong song, a really strong song, one of the best songs on the time, on the side. Now, the most famous song on here is "We Shall Dance," and that was the hit. And that's the one that you might have heard of. And that's it's probably the most commercial song on the record. It's got this very gentle, wafting wah-wah sound that's very reminiscent of some of Aphrodite's child's ballads. Now, one thing I think that annoys me a little bit about that song, it seems to be about poverty and having enough money to pay off the violins for the ball and so on. Demis says violins, and that really bugs me every time I hear it. I've got to say, you know, working as a language teacher, as I did for many years, when you get the pronunciation wrong on one word in a song, you know, it really irritates the language teacher in me. You know, it reminds me a little, I'm going off tangent here, but it just reminds me a little bit of the Donovan song, The Retired Writer in the Sun. And because he gets the stress wrong on the word retired, instead of saying retired, he says retired. So it sounds like he's singing about a retard writer in the sun. So you've got to get your stress right on your lyrics. Anyway, that's the most famous song, but I think the standout from side one is the closer, Fire and Ice. So that is a big, dramatic, apocalyptic ballad as Demis wonders whether the world will end with fire or ice. Now, the British version of the album is the same, apart from the cover, obviously, in every respect to the continental version, but they made a wise choice. They flipped the first song and the last song on side one. So this one opens with Fire and Ice, and it's a much more dramatic and engaging opener. And they close side one with the poem On the Greek Side of My Mind. And that's probably a better way of doing it, even though the poem sort of introduces a lot of the songs. Anyway, a lot of strong songs on side one. We've got very atmospheric, very apocalyptic. We've got some studio effects like wah-wah and some phasing. We've got widdly proggy bits. We've got very ethnic and Byzantine sounding instruments. So all in all, really good. Side two continues in the same vein. Things like My Blue Ship A Sailing. You've got this sort of Demis as this castaway on a rock, dying after his ship sinks and so on. You've got Oh My Friend, You've Been Untrue to Me, which I think is the standout on this side. Very proggy, lots of very difficult widdly bits, as well as nice bits of phase. And Lord of the Flies, which this time sees Demis lamenting his dream girl who's made of sand, and she's locked in a dungeon without any key, and the only way he can rescue her is to sell his soul to the devil. So he ends by saying, "Come on, devil, I'm ready." Really interesting. If you like Aphrodite's Child and that sort of apocalyptic Greek proggy psych, this fits exactly into those. It's sort of halfway between The End of the World and 666. So I love this album. I think it's really, really strong. I think I would give it about four stars out of 5. It loses a star, I think, because first, the poem, The Greek Side of My Mind, it's really atmospheric, but it probably goes on a bit longer than it needs to. There's another repetitive song, da, 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 da. I can't remember which one it is now, that just repeats far too often. And come on, She Came Up From the North, beautiful song. You could have translated that a bit better, or at least rewritten new lyrics to it. But on the whole, Demis Roussos' Fire and Ice stroke On the Greek Side of My Mind is well worth exploring. You can still find it for very little money in charity shops around the country. it started to get a little bit more critical evaluation in recent years. So it might start getting rarer and the price might going up, but you can still get it for a couple of quid. So if you find it, come across it. The international version on the Greek side of my mind, a bit harder to find. So there we have it. I mean, I think we will definitely do another program focusing on Aphrodite's Child. Maybe we'll rank the albums because they only did 3. So ranking videos when they do 30 albums. But if they've only done 3, well, that's another story. So anyway, let me leave you with the immortal question. As Demis asked, shall the world end in fire or ice?